Fry.
Thank you. You can be seated. Anything before we bring in the jury?
No, Judge, just to clarify that we'll be calling Daniel Foster as opposed to defense call.
I was going to make it theirs out of order, but I don't care.
We'll just do it with our case in chief.
And then you can cross?
Yeah, and I'm not gonna
Okay, that's fine.
get too far afield of that.
Let's bring up the jury. What are you doing? He didn't come in with a mask. Is he going to have a mask issue?
Yes, Judge, I'm sorry. I
All right,
I
all right.
forgot to notify you.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Bogan, we have moved the camera again, just so you know.
Understood, Judge.
Yeah, let's grab a few more. People may want those. I got my keys. Okay. Okay. Hey, we can be seated. Your next witness, Mr. Champagne.
Thank you. The people call Mr. Daniel Foster to the stand.
All right. Come up to the witness stand, please, Mr. Foster. And if you would raise your right hand before you sit down, so I can swear you in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. Have a seat. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. Could you introduce yourself to the jury?
Daniel Foster,
Okay. And probably the common spelling, but how do you spell your last name?
Foster.
All right. Where do you live, sir?
Parachute, Colorado.
Okay. And did you ever live here in the La Plata County region?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to direct your attention specifically to November of 2015.
All right.
Do you recall taking a hike up on Middle Mountain on November 1st?
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about that.
We just moved here and decided to go for a hike before they told us it was going to snow for the first time, and just drove until the truck. I hit a hole I couldn't go. Didn't know nothing about four-wheel drive. Had a two-wheel drive truck. Climbed out the truck, ate some lunch, and then took off down the mountain.
And who were you with?
My wife, Leah.
Leah, okay. And while you were out on the hike that day, did you find anything of interest?
Animal den and a bone, some bones.
Okay.
That was it.
Well, now you say animal den. What makes you say that?
It was like a whole bunch of trees. You had to step down through the roots, and then there was just this area that looked like an animal had been laying in it, and there was a couple bones.
When people say den, you know, like a den of animals.
Yeah, someplace that something laid there and chewed on the bone. I mean, that's why I say den. You could tell there was animal fur on the things and stuff like that.
Okay, so it looked like an animal had habitated or bedded down in there. We're not talking about like a hole in the mountain.
No, it was just like a little, you stepped down and there was like a wall of trees and shrubbery right here, so you had to go out that way from the tree that was behind you. I just walked around the tree.
Did it seem like...
Hold on. Mr. Foster, I know you haven't been in court. I hope you haven't been in too many times.
No.
You have to give a little pause because you're kind of talking over the prosecutor, and then we have trouble keeping a record.
Oh, okay.
She has to write down everything, and she
Sorry
can't do
about
two
that.
at once. Okay.
I talk fast when I get nervous, too.
All right. We'll all slow down a little bit. And so you said you saw some fur and things like that around in that area. Was it like an area that was kind of protected by the trees?
Yeah, a little bit. There was one big tree, and you had to go one way or another around the tree. And then right after you stepped down around that tree through its roots, there was just like shrubbery and stuff, so you had to go out the other side by the other side of the tree. Right. So either way you came around the tree, you were going to hit this area, and you had to go past these trees. Okay. One way or the other.
And we have some other witnesses that are going to talk about that area later for the jury, but I want to ask you more specifically about what you found in that alcove or that area in between those trees. What did you find there?
What looked like a part of a skull, and I just picked it up and handed it to my wife. Said, "Look, a skull." Just thought it was something neat, just laying on the ground.
Was it, when you found it laying on the ground, was it on dry ground, or was it?
Yeah, it was in the little area right behind the tree, sitting up against almost in the middle of it, but a little bit closer to the shrubbery trees.
And this area in the trees, were there any other bones inside that area?
No, not really. There was just like tufts of fur on a couple pieces of stuff, and really the only bone I noticed was the one I picked up.
Okay. Now, when you were out on the hike, as I understand it, you had started up on Middle Mountain Road and walked down into this area. Is that right? And do you recall sort of walking across an open field to get there? Yeah,
we went to an open field. I remember we stopped because someone had chopped up a tree, and they left the big old chunks of the tree there, so that's where we ate our lunch.
Okay. And as you were walking down, do you recall seeing, like, cattle and other animals?
No, there wasn't any other animals.
Okay. Cattle, then?
There was cows all over Middle Mountain. I don't remember seeing any at that point in time.
Okay. And were there any cows or other animals down in that alcove of trees that we're talking about?
Not that I remember.
And when you got down in that alcove of trees, I think you just said there were no other bones that you saw in that area? Okay. So you picked up the skull, you showed it to your wife. Did it strike you that it was a human skull when you first saw it?
No, but I don't pay attention to all that. I just thought it was neat. It was a bone.
Okay.
My wife watches, like, murder death shows and stuff. I'm all about superheroes and music.
All right, then. And so, do you recall what happened after you gave it to her?
She mentioned something about she thought it was human. I joked and said, no, it wasn't. She handed it back to me, and I set it down, just kind of let it go and let it fall on the ground. And we kept on, and obviously it nagged at her. Yeah.
When you put it down, did it undergo or receive any damage? Like, did it hit a rock or anything like that when you put it down?
Like, the trees here, the shrubbery was here. We stepped out here. There was like a little rivulet of water, and I just dropped it and landed in one of the puddles.
Okay. Did you hear it break or crack, anything along those lines?
No, it just splashed.
Okay.
I mean, I dropped it from like my knee height. I didn't throw it or nothing. I just let it fall.
Okay. Now, while you were holding it, did you like carve on it with a knife or anything like that?
Mm-hmm. No, didn't have a knife.
Didn't have, okay. All right. And do you recall returning back to that area a couple of days later?
Yeah.
And why did you come back to that area later?
They went out with my wife. I went to work, and they didn't find anything that afternoon, so they made me come out the next day.
Okay. And were you able to find it?
Yeah, we wound up finding it. Just wandered away from everybody and eventually made my way back to where I was.
And do you remember that moment of when you found it?
Yeah, one of the detectives in Leah wasn't too far away.
Okay. Can you describe kind of the best of your memory about that sequence of events?
I walked up, looked down, saw it in the water, said, look, I found it. They turned around, said, oh, cool. They told me to put it down. I put it back down.
Okay. Now, you gestured with your hand that you kind of picked it up.
Yeah, I picked it up, and I said, I found it. And they said, don't touch it. And I said, well, yeah, I put it back down.
And when you put it back down, did you damage it at all?
Mm-mm. I just put it back where I found it.
Okay, and we have to get a verbal yes or no instead of a uh-huh or a mm-mm. What was that?
No, I didn't damage it. I very carefully put it down because she was very adamant about me putting it back down very carefully.
Okay. Was it in roughly the same location where you had first found it?
Yeah, it was about 10 feet away, maybe.
Okay, but
Like I said, we found it, walked out, set it down, maybe 10 feet, 3-4 steps.
3 or 4 steps?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have any other questions for you, sir. Thank you.
All right.
Defense?
Yes, please. Mr. Foster, just building on what you've already talked about, you've described a number of things. You've described an animal den, a bone, and some other activities back from November 2015. I want to ask you, when you come up with this interpretation, this idea, this observation that this was an animal den, what life experience do you have that makes you think that makes you able to identify these sorts of things in nature?
Just common sense. I grew up in Louisiana in the woods. I mean, common sense, first stuck in wood. There's a bone there. Grass is all reveled up. I mean, just observation.
Right. And safe to say, you grew up in Louisiana, right?
Right.
And a lot of people in Louisiana hunt and hang out in the woods.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't believe you hunt, do you?
No.
But you grew up in that culture and in the woods and hunting. And so did you get a lot of opportunities to see nature, see animals, see tracks?
Yes, I love, I'm a nature lover. I've always spent time outdoors.
And going back to the first day that you found the skull, again, you've described that as the skull being in the middle of that area. Remember saying that a few moments ago? And when you say that area, you mean the animal den, right?
Right.
And when you're talking about the animal den, it's an alcove protected by trees and shrubs.
Right.
Fur stuck on some of the trees and the shrubs.
Right.
No question in your mind that was a place where a wild animal would bed down.
Had at some point in time.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you also said on direct it looked like that's the place where a wild animal would relax and gnaw or chew on a bone.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And the first day that you found the skull, sounds like you parked up on top on the road. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then it sounds like you had picnic by a chopped down tree or something like that.
Right.
And then you found the skull thereafter.
Yeah, we hiked for a while, probably an hour or so downside of the mountain.
Okay. An hour from when you left the car, or an hour?
Yeah, probably about an hour from when we left the car.
Okay. How long did you have picnic for?
Long enough to eat a couple sandwiches and
Okay.
have a conversation before we decided to pack up and head out.
Okay.
Maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Okay. So you hike for about an hour, hour and a half. During that time, you break for 15 minutes for picnic by the tree that you described.
If we hiked from the car to where we picnicked, maybe 30, 35 minutes, and then had our little picnic, and maybe about 45 minutes to an hour after that is where we came to that little alcove, because we had to finish going through the clearing, and then we went down into the trees. So sometime after we got down in the trees.
And then after you found the skull, did you find any other evidence of animal activity or any tracks or anything after that on that day?
Yes, sir. We continued on and went kind of like we were going up the other side of the valley, and wound up coming to a patch of snow that had a whole bunch of bear tracks and baby bear tracks in it.
How'd that strike you?
Being from Louisiana where there are no bears, it was time to turn around and go back to the truck.
And your ability to identify those tracks as bear tracks, does that flow from the same sort of upbringing in Louisiana, being in the woods?
And they're really, really big, kind of gives it away. Just really big paw prints with really long claws. It doesn't matter what it is, I'm not staying.
So you see the bear tracks, and you guys are out of there, right?
Yep. We turned around and decided we were not following a bear and her baby.
And then going back to when Skull was first found, sounds like you and the missus had a disagreement about what kind of bone this was, whether it was human or non-human?
I wouldn't call it a disagreement. She said it was human. I said, okay, if you say so. You watch all them shows. I think it's a raccoon, and put it down.
And it's at that point where you dropped it on the ground in that rivulet.
Yeah.
Distance about from your knee to the ground.
Right.
You didn't spike it like a football, but you dropped it.
Right. Yeah, I just let it go.
Right. Let it go, and it caused a little bit of a splash. And that.
Right.
Okay. When you returned to that area with law enforcement, sounds like you were the one who rediscovered this item as well, correct? Yeah. And when you did, how far away were Leah and the lady detective investigator?
If I had to guesstimate, maybe here to that wall over there.
Okay. And when you rediscovered this item, did you hold it up above your head and say skull?
No, I didn't say skull. I said I found it.
Okay. And that's
my recollection.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
To my recollection, it was just I found it.
Based upon your experience in the woods and anything like that, did you associate this den where the skull was first found with any specific kind of animal?
No. No, I'm not that good.
All right. Nothing further for this witness, Judge.
Redirect?
Yes, Judge. Now, you're not a wildlife biologist, are you?
No.
And what you saw up there that makes you describe it as a den, it was what again?
Just fur stuck on a tree. The ground looked like it had been laid on. Okay. I mean, grass folded over, and a bone just laying there, kind of just states something was there chewing on something. I mean, I have a dog. I've always lived around animals. I mean, they snuggle into someplace they feel safe and just kill time.
Yeah. Now, have you seen where like deer, mule deer, that kind of thing have laid down and bedded down?
Yeah.
Did it look like that?
Similar. The bone was really the only thing I saw that made it a little bit different.
Okay. So you have no idea what kind of animal was laying down there?
I couldn't say what type of animal.
Okay. Did you see any scat around in there?
No.
Did you see any evidence of babies, like, right in that general area, baby animals? You don't know if that's a regularly used habitat for any animal.
No.
You just saw the grass folded down.
Right.
And you couldn't tell what kind of fur it was.
No, I didn't pick it up and examine it. I'm sure if I would have picked it up and played with it, I probably could have guessed, but it still would have just been nothing but a guess.
So all you can really tell is that an animal may have folded over some grass.
Right.
Nothing further.
Anything from the jury? Can this witness be released?
By all means.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
You are free to go. Thank you very much. Okay, next prosecution witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. People will call Dr. Kevin Johnson.
Okay.
Your Honor,
Yeah, thank you. I think that's good. We'll see. Can I have you raise your hand before you sit down, your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Have a seat, but speak up louder than that, all right?
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Soft spoken.
Sure, no problem. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Doctor.
Hi.
Could you please start by introducing yourself to the jury by your full name?
Sure. Heather Elizabeth Johnson,
And could you please spell your last name for the record?
Johhnson.
Ma'am, how are you employed?
I'm a research wildlife biologist for the U.S. Geological Survey at the Alaska Science Center in Anchorage.
And what does that work entail currently?
I'm a large mammal ecologist that, mostly studies the effects of climate change and energy development on large mammals in the Arctic currently. Sorry.
If you could speak a little slower, Doctor, it'll help the court reporter.
Sure. Okay. Currently, I mostly work on the effects of climate change and energy development on large mammals in the Arctic.
What are some of those large mammals in the Arctic?
I mostly work on caribou right now.
Okay. And is that a job with the federal government?
Yeah.
So does that mean that you do different assignments and travel to different places?
My job is to do research for Department of Interior agencies, so U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Land Management, Park Service, those kind of agencies. But all my projects are pretty much focused on the North Slope.
So are those agencies you named some state agencies that are across the nation?
The ones I listed were all federal agencies, but I also work in conjunction with Alaska Department of Fish and Game.
Okay.
So, yeah, work with both state and federal agencies.
And does your work entail doing a particular research project and then moving on to a different research project in a different area?
Yep, I do a project, usually collect the data, analyze it, write the results, publish it, and then, move on.
How long have you been in Alaska?
4 years.
Since 2017?
Correct.
Can you walk the jury through your educational background, please?
Okay. Sure. I have a undergraduate degree, Bachelor of Science, from the University of California, San Diego, in ecology. I have a master's degree from the University of Arizona in wildlife science, and a doctorate from the University of Montana in wildlife ecology.
When did you obtain your bachelor's degree?
1999.
And you said that was ecology or biology or?
Ecology.
Ecology.
Biology, the emphasis in ecology.
Okay. And then when did you obtain your master's degree?
2003.
And then when did you obtain your PhD?
2010.
What was your PhD in again?
Wildlife ecology.
And what does that mean?
Really the study of animals and their environments.
Okay. Out in the wilderness?
Yeah.
It's pertinent to the work that you still do today?
Correct.
And then what type of work did you start doing? Can you walk the jury, I guess, through your work history as well?
Sure. I did a postdoctorate job at the University of Montana, USGS Montana Wildlife Cooperative Research Unit. Then I moved on to taking a permanent job with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. That was in 2011 through 2017. And for them, I was a mammals researcher, mostly studying bears, leading the bear research for the state of Colorado.
And in that work that you did, and then after that, you went to Alaska?
Correct.
Let's focus in on that work that you did from 2011 to 2017. Where specifically in Colorado did you work?
Here. The research project I was leading was based around Durango. It was motivated by rising bear-human conflicts in Colorado, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife wanted to better understand why those conflicts were increasing. Was it because bears were changing their behavior or bear populations were increasing? So we did the study here based in Southwest Colorado.
And I'll talk a little bit more about that study in a minute, but that study was focused in the Durango area specific to bears?
Correct.
Did that include field work out in the mountains and in the habitats of the bears around here?
Yes, they're in the field about 9 months a year.
And then you mentioned that after you complete a research project, you do publications sometimes.
Yeah, we publish all the work that we do.
So how many publications have you done in your career?
I think I don't know, I'm at something like 36 or 37, maybe with a couple more currently in press.
Are these peer-reviewed type of publications?
Yep, all peer-reviewed scientific publications and scientific journals.
Recognized in the scientific community?
Yep.
What type of subject matter have you published on?
Mostly focused on animal behavior and population dynamics.
Okay. What types of animals have you published on?
Mule deer, elk, bighorn sheep, caribou, black bears, cougars, wolves, lots of large mammals, both predators and prey.
Okay. And then in your study here from 2011 to 2017, did you gain specific knowledge about black bears and their hibernation patterns?
Yes.
At this time, I move to qualify Dr. Johnson as an expert in the field of wildlife biology and animal behavior.
Any objections?
No objection, and no objection to her being certified in wildlife ecology as well.
Okay. So you'll be qualified as an expert in those areas.
Thank you, Your Honor. So let's start by talking about your publication. So, and your study and your publication. So what was the publication called?
You're referring to the hibernation publication, correct?
The hibernation publication from the Durango area in your study from 2011 to 2017 on black bears.
Yeah, so let me just qualify. So the study in black bears was really large in scale, both on bear behavior, population dynamics. We also focused on people. Probably lots of the jurors here remember getting surveys from us or a bear can from us. So we had lots of focuses. But I think what's relevant to this is we published one paper specifically on hibernation and looking at when bears hibernated, when they came out of hibernation, and factors associated with hibernation.
Okay. And what other, so as we're talking about the study and the publication, hibernation, but what other bear behavior did you study?
So we looked at movement behavior, how bears forage, especially around human development. We estimated abundance and density of bears. We looked at how bear use of human development influences their survival and reproductive success. So we had, I think we published 10 or 12 papers from the Durango study so far.
Is it accurate to say that the interactions between bears and humans were central to some of the study that you were doing?
Yeah, the whole study was completely motivated by trying to understand bear-human conflicts and what was driving those patterns. That really increases in bear-human conflicts.
Was that study called, I don't want to make you memorize do you have the entire title memorized? Okay. Was it Black Bear Exploitation of Urban Environments?
Yes.
Finding and Managing Solutions and Assessing Regional Population Effects?
Yes, that's what we call the general project and proposal.
Okay. Can you talk about the study, what you actually did in the study to study these behaviors by the bears?
Yeah, to study bear behavior, we trapped bears in the summer months using box traps in and around Durango. Focused really within about 10 kilometers of town. And then we fit adult females with GPS collars. So those would collect a location of the bears every hour. We got really fine scale data on what they're doing. And we get activity data also from the collars, letting us know where we use that was particularly to see when bears hibernated, when they stopped moving around. Then we'd go to the bears' dens. We'd track them to their dens in the winter, and go into the dens, pull them out, and collect a lot of data on things like reproductive success. We'd change out the batteries in the collars, body condition, body weight, all those things. And
how many bears did you study annually?
Our goal was to finish every summer with 40 bears collared. Over the course of the study, we collared 83 adult females. We did a whole total of 970 bear captures. A lot of those are recaptures of bears over time. Yeah.
And then you said bear females, was that the type of bear that you were collaring?
Yeah. And I probably should say in total, I think we marked 432 unique bears in the system. So yeah, we handled a lot of bears. But our emphasis of collaring was adult female.
Okay. How does that correspond in the patterns of adult female bears and, let's say, adult male bears in terms of hibernation patterns?
Yeah, so folks have found published results. We didn't study male hibernation here, but there's been lots of other published studies throughout the U.S. that show that that male bears and non-pregnant female bears tend to show similar hibernation patterns. So pregnant females tend to hibernate the longest, but non-pregnant females and males tend to hibernate for similar lengths of time. Yeah, in some studies they find that males hibernate for less time, but it's because they emerge early in the spring, but they tend to all go to bed about the same time in the fall.
So in your study, did you collar both pregnant female bears and non-pregnant female bears?
Yes.
And did that give you a representation across every type of bear of what time in the year the bears would be hibernating?
Yes.
And what types of factors go into hibernation of bears? And let me be more specific. What factors go into the time of year that a bear will actually hibernate for the winter?
Yeah, so we found some things like a bear's age or reproductive status, but then the most important thing was natural food conditions. So hibernation is a response to food shortage. That's why bears have evolved to hibernate. And so years where we didn't have much for natural food, bears would hibernate earlier. And then, you know, if there's a lot of great natural foods in the fall, bears would stay up later and hibernate later, just taking advantage of the food lots available. So natural foods was the biggest, after thinking about reproductive success and age, natural foods then was most important. Also important was the fall temperature. That was correlated with elevation. So, higher elevation is cooler temperatures. But bears that were in areas with cooler temperatures, they hibernated earlier as well.
So your study was focused on Durango. Did it ever bring you up to Vallecito and Middle Mountain Road area?
We trapped bears within, I said, about 10 kilometers of Durango, but that, then the bears, went where they went. So we were tracking bears that went in a much broader area than that. We had about a half a dozen bears use the Vallecito area over the course of the study, and we had one bear in particular that always liked to den on Runlet Peak. So we were up there every winter going to her den.
Okay. And you had that was one of the collared bears?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you about, you talked about the difference in altitude. Do you know roughly, is it a higher altitude at Vallecito area than it is in Durango?
Yeah.
So how would that impact the hibernation patterns?
Yeah, cooler temperatures up there with bears hibernating earlier up there.
So if anything from your study, the dates would be later that the hibernation occurred, then they would hibernate earlier up in that mountain area.
Correct.
And were you specifically doing this study throughout the winter of 2012 into 2013?
Yes.
And did you collect statistics in terms of the average hibernation date and the outliers as well for bears in the Durango area in the winter of 2012-2013?
Yes.
Can you talk to the jury a little bit about the average hibernation time for bears in winter of 2012?
Sure. So 2012 was the earliest we saw bears hibernate. On average across the study, bears on average hibernate. The average hibernation date was October 20th, but that fall of 2012, bears on average hibernated on October 10th. So it's about a 10-day shift earlier in the mean hibernation date. Can I look at my notes here for the variation around that?
Would it refresh your memory?
Yes.
Judge, I'd ask that she just.
Can I just see, I'm sorry, can I just see what she's looking at?
Sure.
Have some of the date ranges on there.
That's fine. Can you make sure before you leave today, the DA makes a copy of it so that they can provide it to the defense? Okay. Anything I shouldn't look at on here? No? Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Judge.
You bet.
So, Dr. Johnson, let me ask you, what are your notes, just so the jury knows what you're looking at?
Yeah, so I just to make sure I get the dates right, I put on the mean hibernation date for each year of our study, and then the earliest and the latest hibernation date that we've collected data on for each year. Anyway, I couldn't hold all those dates perfectly in my mind, so yeah, I have them here. So
let me slow you down just for a second. Is that published data?
I pulled out the year-specific information for this today, so you couldn't find this necessarily. We published all the den information. It should be on a CPW's website, the raw data,
okay,
which I use to calculate
and
the annual mean.
And that's derived from the study that we talked about?
Yep.
And that was a study that you were asked about back in the early stages of this investigation?
Correct. For the publication, the year-specific information wasn't of interest.
Understood. So I think where we were at was the average date for hibernation in 2012, 2013. You had already answered October 10th. Is that right?
Yes. So, yep, so in the fall of 2012, hibernation happened about 10 days earlier than our other years. That was that food failure year. That year, our earliest bear denned on September 21st, and the latest bear that we had collared denned on November 13th.
Okay. So are those what you refer to in the study as the outliers?
I don't know if I'd call them outliers per se, but I mean that we often report a range, a mean and a range, and that's the range.
I see. So the mean is the average of everything within the range?
Correct.
And then as it goes out, these are the earliest and latest.
Mm-hmm. The extreme.
How about, let me ask you, just in general, your study captured the same data for multiple years in a row?
Yes.
And you said that this was a low food year?
Yes.
So does that have a direct correlation to the data that you got from this year?
Yes. Can I explain that
Yes.
low food year a bit more, what that is?
Yes, please.
So often what we talk about around here with bears is these food failure years, these years where we have really low natural foods. That happens commonly when you have a really late, hard June freeze. And often we also will have really dry weather here. So in the summer of 2012, there was a late, hard June freeze, followed by drought conditions. And when you have a late June freeze, what happens there is all the mass-producing species that, I'm going to start, slow down. All the nut and berry-producing species, they flower out. Then you have a late freeze, kills the flowers, and then you don't have any berry or nut production. Okay, so that's what bears eat in the late summer and fall. That's what they rely on to eat. So, and it's the same idea. If you have an apple tree in your yard and it flowers out and there's a hard late freeze, kills those flowers, and you don't get apples that year. It's that same idea. So in the summer of 2012, we had that scenario where there just really wasn't anything for bears to eat at the end of the summer. And that's what we found, those years that have those low natural foods for bears, then these bears, they den earlier. It's just not worth staying awake. There's nothing to eat.
And then if they den by the most extreme end of your range was November 13th of 2012, and that was in the Durango area, how would that translate to the Vallecito area?
Our one bear that was collared up in Vallecito, that year she denned, and I'm going to look at it just to make sure I have it. Right, she denned on September 28th, for example. We had her data on her over 4 winters. She denned that year on September 28th. She denned subsequent years on September 23rd, October 1st, and the latest she ever denned was October 14th.
Was she pregnant all of those years?
No.
So
Bears, and I should clarify real quick, bears, they reproduce every other year, generally.
Okay. So that would that data be reflective of an example of that higher altitude being below the what you're referring to as the mean hibernation date? Yeah,
I mean, she denned earlier than, she was on the early side, and she was also at the higher elevation, on the peak of higher elevation, colder temperatures.
Okay. How about the other years? Can you just talk to the jury a little bit about what the median dates were across the years of your study for bear hibernation at the latest?
Sorry, do you want to give the median date or the latest date?
So let's just give the jury as much information as we have on this topic from your study. We're starting with 2011, 2012 year, right?
We had 1 year prior to that. 2011, 2012, the first year of our study, the average hibernation date was October 18th. Next year, 2012, was October 10th.
That's the year that we talked about?
Correct.
And then 2013 into 2014?
October 20th.
Okay. The next year?
October 21st.
And that's 14 into 15?
Correct.
And then 15 into 16?
October 31st. This was like a 10-day shift late. So this last year, bears generally hibernated later than we've seen in previous years. It was a really warm fall, the warmest fall in the study.
So over the course of those years, what was the mean date overall for bears hibernating?
October 20th.
And am I saying the right term, the mean dates?
Yes.
None of the mean dates went beyond October.
Correct.
And that's down in Durango where it's a little bit warmer and lower altitude.
That's for bears, all the bears we had in our system, which ranged from Biologist, all the way south of 160. I mean, that was the mean for all bears that we had collared.
Okay. And then in terms of I don't want to use the term outliers, but on the edge of the range, right, the bear that hibernates the latest of all those years, can you just explain that to the jury, please?
Yeah. So, do you want me to go through year by year?
Yes, please.
Okay. So for the fall of 2011, our last bear hibernated on November 11th. In 2012, the last bear hibernated on November 13th. Fall of 2013, the last bear hibernated on November 19th. Fall of 2014, the last bear hibernated on November 16th. And then in the fall of 2015, the last bear hibernated on December 11th.
So based on that information that you have, that year of 2015, 2016 looks different than the other years, right?
Correct.
But the mean date is still in October for when bears hibernated?
Correct.
And in every other year, the latest was November 19th?
Correct.
And then the difference between 2015 and 2016 winter and 2012 to 2013 winter was significant in terms of weather and food?
Correct.
Is that reflected in the difference in the mean date by about 21 days?
I think generally, yeah. I mean, those are the big drivers of what we saw. With the analysis, that those were the big factors driving shifts in hibernation dates.
Okay. So absent, is it fair to say that absent an extreme outlier on the winter in the November months of 2012, that all the bears are going to be hibernating before November 19th?
Objection, form of the question. Her study's confined to collared female bears, not all bears.
Well, I think she's qualified, and you may have to ask a little foundational stuff to see whether or not that can translate to other bears.
Yes, Your Honor. So you talked about collared, am I saying it right if I say collared pregnant female bears?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you also have collared female bears that are not pregnant.
Correct.
And then I think you testified that the collared female bears that are not pregnant have similar hibernation patterns to male bears.
Correct.
So if we captured all the categories of bears with your collars and the timing of hibernation?
Yeah, we should have. I mean, that range should pretty well encapsulate for the most part. It's still a sample. It's like we don't have every individual, but female collared even. But it's a good sample. About as good a sample as people get on bears.
Right. And then for this particular year, the mean date is all the way back to October 10th, and then that Biologist bear that's at the higher altitude is hibernating even sooner than that.
Right.
So based on all of that information, what's the likelihood that there are any bears even awake on November 19th of 2012?
Low. Very low probability of a bear being awake at that date.
Very low.
Yeah.
And absent some kind of extreme outlier,
Correct.
they're all hibernating.
Correct.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about bear behavior in general as well. Is there differences in animal and human conflicts in different areas, such as Vallecito, where there's less houses and food sources, et cetera, and then down in town where there's residential areas?
I mean, numerically, certainly, there's a lot more homes around Durango and a lot more food sources for bears, closer to Durango than there would be in Vallecito. But Vallecito, still does get, they're certainly getting into trash and bird feeders and all that stuff too, but you just don't have the density of homes the number of homes that you do, and over as great of an area as you do here closer to Durango.
What causes the majority, or what's at the heart of the majority of human-bear conflicts?
There's lots of factors, really.
Sure. Is food sources one of them?
Big one.
Okay.
Yeah, just bear access to human food sources. Bears eat the same things we do. They have stomachs like ours. They're omnivores. They can take advantage of all the same foods we can. So, so bears having access to human foods is a big issue.
Okay. Are you familiar with the Vallecito area and Middle Mountain Road?
I am.
Have your studies taken you up there various times over the years?
Yes, and like I mentioned, we had a bear that was collared on Runlet Peak. So each winter we'd go up and we'd first scout the dens, just figure out where the dens were, and then that would be one trip, and then we'd go up the second time to actually capture the bear, work the bear at the den. So, each winter we'd be going up usually twice.
Okay. And so how many times over the years of your study would you estimate you've been up on the Middle Mountain and Runlet Park and Vallecito area up there?
Probably about 8 times.
Okay. Do you know what the terrain looks like up there?
I do.
You familiar with Runlet Park itself?
Yeah.
And Middle Mountain Road itself?
Yep.
So being that there are no residences or trash on the upper Middle Mountain area, would that make it more or less likely that there would be a bear-human conflict up there?
Less likely.
Are you familiar with the types of animals in the area up there in general?
Yes.
Okay. So what types of bears are we talking about here?
All black bears. We only have black bears in Colorado. So most of our bears in Colorado, like around Durango, they're brown, but they are black bears. So there's no brown bears or grizzly bears here. They're all black bears.
And how are black bears different from brown bears and grizzly bears in terms of their food sources, their main food sources?
Oh, well, from studies in Colorado on bear diet, we know that bears initially in the early part of the summer are mostly eating like an elk or a deer. They're mostly eating grasses and forbs in the first part of the summer. Occasionally a bear will forage on a fawn, like a deer fawn or an elk calf, but primarily they're eating vegetation. Later in the summer, once those masting foods become available, the berries, acorns, that's what they're feeding on. And then a lot of insects too. They get a lot of their protein just from ants and insects.
So the only bears in Colorado being black bears, is large prey a primary food source for black bears?
No, the only time they're feeding on large prey is really at the fawning and calving season in June, when fawns and calves are still really vulnerable. Like first week the fawn or calf is born, that's when it's vulnerable to bear predation. And then once it's really up with its mom, running with its mom, it becomes it's just vulnerable to predation like that. And bears will scavenge, as well. If they find something, they will eat it for sure.
Okay. So really small fawns, like the ones that can't get away, kind of thing? Yeah,
they're in a hiding phase initially. Calves and fawns, they're in the moms kind of stash them. So it's that first week in a hiding phase, and that's when they're really vulnerable to bear predation.
Okay. What other animals are in the Middle Mountain area, bigger animals that might be, to some extent, carnivorous?
Cougars.
Okay. Is a cougar what's commonly referred to as a mountain lion?
Correct.
Okay. And what other animals that eat meat?
Coyotes are up there, and then smaller carnivores like foxes or bobcats.
Okay. How much do coyotes weigh, roughly?
25, 30 pounds, maybe.
So they're a smaller animal.
Yes.
But the mountain lions are the cougars and the bears are the bigger animals.
Correct.
Okay. Any large predators that I'm missing that would be in the Middle Mountain area?
No.
No wolves in the Middle Mountain area?
No wolves.
How far south do wolves get?
Well, in 2012, they were, there might have been a stray wolf, occasionally a stray wolf from Wyoming that was collared was coming into Colorado, but I'm not sure if that was even happening in 2012. Right now, there's a couple wolves in the far northern part of the state, but they're not down here.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to publish what's been previously admitted as People's Exhibit 224, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead.
So if we could just scroll see the map itself. That's great, thank you. Perfect, thank you. So Dr. Johnson, do you recognize the area in People's Exhibit 224?
Yes.
Okay, where is that depicting?
Sorry, what are you asking?
Where is this?
Oh, this is, yeah, I mean, this is showing Biocito, Middle Mountain Road going up.
Okay. So basically, is below this Biocito Reservoir, does that look familiar to you?
Yeah.
And then up here is Middle Mountain Road highlighted in red to the right of the map.
Yes.
And then at the top it ends, but does it continue on into Runlet Park, what you were talking about before?
Yes.
So this terrain, and you also see indicated where there's a residence on the left of the map?
Yes.
And then you see indicated a remain site in the middle of the map?
Yep.
And then there's Runlet Park. Do you recognize, or are you familiar with reading topographical maps from your time in the field?
Yes.
What's notable about the terrain from having seen it and just what's depicted on the topographical map between the residence and Remain Site 1?
Well, there's a lot of elevation gain.
Is it difficult terrain from your experience?
Yes.
Cliffs, deadfall, woods, things like that?
Yes. I was really thankful for Middle Mountain Road because, I mean, we had to get up there, and
Right.
I was really thankful for the road.
Is that difficult hiking in there?
Yeah.
And have you hiked a lot of this area yourself?
I take the road.
Okay.
As far as I can.
Let me ask you a different question. You take the road as far as you can, then do you have to get out and hike?
Yeah.
And is some of that hiking difficult even from the road?
Yes.
And then if you're looking at Remain Site 1 over to Runlet Park, what's notable about the terrain and just the elevation and topography going from Remain Site 1 over, is that Middle Mountain in between Remain Site 1 and Runlet Park?
Cumulative, Judge. Several witnesses spoken to what the lines on this map mean.
All right, I understand the objection, going to overrule it. Go ahead.
You've been up here yourself. You said Runlet Park. Is that Middle Mountain that runs in between Remain Site 1 and Remain Site 2? Or, I'm sorry, and Runlet Park?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. What's that terrain like if you were to try to walk from Remain Site 1 over to Runlet Park?
I mean, it's better than the coming up from the lower part, certainly. But I mean, it's a lot of trees, a lot of underbrush, elevation gain.
Very steep.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as steep certainly as, you know, the lower parts. It really kicks up off the valley floor.
This type of terrain that you've seen up here, does this factor into animals' decisions on whether to carry things?
I would think so. I would assume so.
Okay. Is energy balance something that animals consider?
Yes.
And is difficult terrain like that? Let me ask you a more specific question. Do animals usually do things for a survival reason?
Absolutely.
With regard to food and with regard to energy output, how does that correspond?
Yes, I mean, so animals, they want to acquire the resources, but, you know, as many resources as they can and minimize their expenditure. I mean, that's the whole thing. Animals are often kind of living on the edge. They want to expend the least amount of energy for the greatest gain. Generally the rule of thumb.
I'm going to now publish, Your Honor, People's 223. So, Dr. Johnson, take a look at this map for a second. Does it look like the same area?
Yep.
And this is previously admitted, so there are some locations on here that other witnesses have testified to. But you can see that there's a residence, and then a remain site, and then a skull at various distances. Have you seen this map before?
Yes.
Okay. And you're aware of these locations from having seen them? I'm sorry, you're aware of this area and where these locations are, you've seen the terrain, et cetera?
Yes.
And then assuming that there's a distance on here that's already been testified to as accurate, I'd like to ask you some questions about the distance and terrain here, and just keeping that in mind when I ask you about a few scenarios. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So let's start with the first scenario. Assuming that there's a bear awake on November 19th of 2012, what's the likelihood and what are the factors of that bear killing a child?
I think that specific of a question requires speculation. I think she can speak to the generalities, provided the proper foundation is laid as to what contributes to fatal child bear attacks. But this goes to the ultimate issue before the jury. It's not even a hypothetical. It's basically, what do you think happened?
I think you need to ask the question differently. You need to ask the question based upon the age of Dylan.
Yes, Your Honor.
I think you can get there, but I tend to agree to some extent with Mr. Both.
I understand. So we're going to use a scenario with a 13-year-old boy in November month, November 19th of 2012 up here. What factors cut against a bear attack?
The date, certainly. I mean, it's just really late in the season. In addition to the fact that most bears are hibernating, and particularly that year, bears were hibernating by November 19th. Bears, they don't eat or drink during hibernation. Bears shut down their system through the whole hibernation period, and they don't get there instantly. So the couple weeks prior to hibernation, they slow down. They forage less, they stop eating less, their bodies slowly work to kind of shut down to prepare them for hibernation. So bears aren't, they've finished their hyperphagia mode where they're like late summer, they're early fall, they're eating a lot in preparation for hibernation, but then that ceases and they slow down prior to hibernation. So I think both given the date and the fact that bears, they're not looking for food that late in the season. Those are the big ones. We don't have bear conflicts in November generally.
Just because of the proximity to hibernation?
Yeah.
So even if there was a bear that was beyond your mean numbers of October 10th and beyond even the outer end of the range of your collared bears, they're not going to be in a time of year where they're going to be in conflict?
No, we don't see that. The peak conflicts happen in the summer, especially July, August, early September.
I'd like to give the jury some perspective on bear attacks overall. How many bear fatalities have there been in the history of Colorado?
4.
Ever?
Since 1900, recorded since 1900 to present, there's been 4.
Okay. Now, we had one recently.
Yeah.
And that was in April 30th of 2021, a tragic case in Durango, correct?
Correct.
How does that differ in terms of the scenario we have here, in assuming that there's a bear awake? How is that going to be different than the scenario from April of 2021?
Bears are coming out of hibernation generally mid-April. It takes them a couple weeks, just like they slow down a couple weeks before hibernation. It also takes them a couple weeks to come out of it. At that point, though, they are looking for food. There's not as much to eat at that time of year. Bears are mostly eating grasses and forbs. They're eating like, I say they're eating like an elk or a deer, because that's kind of all there is available to them in that really early part of this, like late spring, early part of the summer.
You know the general area where that bear attack occurred?
I do.
Was it what was that area?
Around Trimble,
And
north of Durango, and it's from our bear study, it's an area that bears gravitate to. They come for human food. There's trailer parks on that stretch. There's a lot of small orchards, a lot of fruit trees. We had a ton of bear activity there during our studies. We had bears from the top of the Plata Mountains come down 15, 16, 17 miles as the crow flies directly to come down to that area for human food, and then forage right there in that area, and then go back up to the top of the Platas. to spend the rest of the season. So, it's an area that bears definitely use and know of to come to for subsidy for human food.
So if there was going to be the fourth bear attack in the 121 years in Colorado documented, is that the type of location you might expect it?
Potentially. I mean, I think it's so rare, it's hard to have any expectation.
Right. Middle Mountain Road would be not have some of those factors you just talked about bears gravitating there, et cetera?
Not for human food subsidies, no.
So perhaps even less likely than the fourth in 121 years. Perhaps less likely on Middle Mountain Road than in the area with the recent bear attack.
I would think so, but I think it's each time, again, it's so rare, it's such kind of a fluke.
What was the last bear fatality before Durango in 2021?
In 2009, there was a fatality of a woman in Uray that was feeding bears in her yard.
So in that situation, it wasn't just someone walking out somewhere close to their home or something like that.
No.
There was some interaction that created a conflict.
Correct.
So that's turning back the clock 12 years for the fatality before this one.
Correct.
And then before that, how long was it? When were those other two fatalities in the history of Colorado?
Can I refresh my memory? Here,
sure. Do you have notes on that?
Yeah.
Sure.
So prior to that, it was 1993. Was the previous attack, and then there was one in 1971.
Or ever in the state?
Ever in the state since 1900 recorded.
How does that compare to, say, lightning strike fatalities?
I looked at...
I think the foundation, not a meteorologist talking about lightning here. Let's...
Mr. Johnson?
Judge, if she knows the answer, she spends a lot of time outside, and given her experience in the area,
But she's not going to know how many lightning strikes there are in this area. I mean, wouldn't that...
Let me ask, I can ask a different question.
Okay.
And I think it's cumulative. I think that, well, you've sustained the objections also.
Thank you.
Without giving numbers, you spend a lot of time in the outdoors, right?
I do.
Lightning is something that sometimes referred to as lightning strikes as a rarity, right?
Correct.
But is that something that you're aware of in your time in the field that does happen from time to time?
Objection, 402, 403, speculative.
You know, I think you're fine with 4 in 120 years, Mr. Johnson.
Understood, Judge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to some more scenarios. So you see the sites on the map, you see the residents, and you see the first remain sites, those two pertinent sites to the case?
Yes.
I want to talk about what a bear does. Let's say in the outside chance that a bear kills someone. What does a bear typically, or an animal for that matter, what does a bear typically do with the carcass?
For any food source the bear has, if it's uncomfortable consuming it where it's at, it'll drag it to a place where it feels safe, or take it to a place that feels safe. People see this all the time around Durango. The bear pulls out a bag of trash from a trash can and drags into the bushes close by, and then spreads it all out and makes a mess of it. That's what the bear will do. It wants to get into a safe place to consume food.
Okay. How far will a bear typically drag something if it's scavenging it or if it's killed it?
What I've seen is usually not more than 100 meters, and that's in my experience. And documented, and in the fatalities that have been recorded from bears, it's not more than, I don't think I've seen any reports more than 300 meters.
Is there a purpose behind the movement of that food source that they've either scavenged or killed?
To get to a safe place. They're concealed. It feels like a safe place. They don't want to be out in the open. They want to just get that to the closest place where they feel safe, dense cover.
So does that energy food balance factor into that decision as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for a bear to take food any further than they have to. So they'll take it to where they feel like they need to be concealed. And that's as far as I want to go.
Okay. And we're talking about on this map a distance of 1.5 miles. So is there any reason that a bear would ever carry a kill from site 1 up to the remain site?
No.
How about other animals in the area? Are there any animals in the area that would do that kind of behavior, carry something 1.5 miles all the way up that mountain?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, for bears and cougars, both of those species show that similar behavior. They take food into a place where they feel safe, and they don't take it further than that.
Let's talk about cougars. How frequent are cougar fatalities in Colorado?
They're more rare than bears. There's only been 14 human fatalities from cougars since 1900 reported across the U.S. In Colorado, there's been 2, one in 1991 and one in 1997.
2 in 121 years.
Correct.
And what about cougars? Let's assume for a second that cougar kills the 3rd human in 121 years. What's the cougar going to do with that body, typically with the carcass?
Get it to a safe place, cache it. It's going to, move it as far as it needs to.
What does cache it mean?
Cougars are more likely to cache. A cougar is a true carnivore. That's what they hunt for a living. So they will commonly drag prey, say a mule deer, a deer or something, and then partially bury it, and that's what we call caching.
Okay. And what's their typical animal behavior in terms of how far they'll move that body or carcass to cache it?
As far as they need to feel safe, and usually that's within a couple 100 yards.
Okay. So similar to a bear, they're going to move it to where they need to safely feed, and that's, in your experience, a couple 100 yards maximum?
Yeah, I mean, usually for bears too, 100 yards is what I've seen.
Okay. Then you mentioned with bears, there's studies that would suggest maybe a little further than that, but certainly no further than, let's say, a 1/4 mile.
I've never seen anything reported further for like a bear like that, more than that distance, yeah.
And then similar with cougars?
Yeah, I don't remember ever seeing something further than that.
Okay. And then we talked also about coyotes, and you said they're pretty small. What do we have in terms of a history of coyote fatalities in the state of Colorado?
None. There are none. There's only been 1 coyote fatality in the United States, and it was not in Colorado.
And how old was the victim in that case?
3-year-old victim, and it was 1981.
And what is, so is it fair to say that none of these animals are going to carry anything from that residence up to that remain site?
No, to carry a whole carcass?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. And then the third scenario I want to talk to you about is we have a remain site, and then we have a indication for a skull there. You see that?
Yep.
And it's over 1.5 miles as the crow flies, but is that how animals travel?
No.
How do animals travel?
It depends on what's motivating them to move, I guess. That's a hard one for me to answer, but but I could tell you that if I was just traveling between the two, I couldn't do it as a crow flies. Just naturally, that terrain is, it's trickier than that.
Right. So you'd have to find a way through there.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be, based on the terrain you described before, it would be navigating cliffs and deadfall and things like that.
That mischaracterizes her answers as to the topography and travel through there.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the cliffs in that area.
Oh, I understand. Okay. So it'd be heavily wooded in deadfall. Is that accurate?
Generally, you're always trying to figure out the best way to go. You go over a ridge, you go down this way. Yeah, if there's a bunch of trees down, you're going to, rocks. You're always kind of working your way through the terrain. You're always trying to go as directly as you can, but it never quite works out that way.
When this exhibit was admitted, there was testimony about it being 1,500 vertical feet up and over and another 500 down from the remain site to the skull site. Does that seem consistent with your knowledge of the area?
Yeah.
Is that a lot of vertical feet to climb in that type of wooded situation?
It is. I mean, I always took the road, like I wasn't going to walk it.
Yeah. Okay. So is it, let's talk about, we talked about the movement of a bear in terms of an entire carcass, right, and caching it. What about pieces of a carcass? Are those the types of things that bears pick up, carry, and run off with long distances?
No.
Why is that not typical bear behavior?
It's, they just don't get nutritional value out of it. They, bears and cougars tend to, you know, they keep the carcass in kind of its general centralized spot. They feed on it till they're done, and then they move on. Other critters, like coyotes or canids in particular, are more likely to pick up a bone or something and go off with it. But yeah, a bear, cougar is not.
Okay.
It's not characteristic.
So we'll set aside bears and cougars because they just don't really behave that way.
Correct.
Let's talk about coyotes. Will coyotes at times pick up a bone and take it a distance?
Yes.
Have you seen this out in the field?
Yes.
What type of distances have you seen out in the field that a coyote would grab, let's say, pretty large bones such as a 13-year-old skull or something comparable to that, right? What types of distances have you seen that coyotes would transport something that size?
My best experience of this is coyotes picking up radio collars. Like I've done a lot of work where you're picking up, looking at mortalities, deer mortalities, bighorn sheep mortalities, and often coyotes as scavengers will pick up a collar, carry it off. That's mostly where my experience from this comes with, and always is recovered within a few hundred yards.
Okay. And is there also a nutritional value and energy output type of analysis from even coyotes?
I would expect so, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So some of this terrain here is probably going to factor into the decision of how far to carry a particular bone by any animal.
I would expect so, yeah.
And is it also going to matter if there's any kind of nutritional value left to that item, whether it's worth the trouble of carrying?
I would expect that to be true.
Are there any studies out there about any of these animals carrying a body part up to 1.5 miles distance over large vertical feet like that?
Of any animal?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And is it anything you've seen or heard of in the field, carrying a bone the size of a skull over that type of distance?
No.
Hearsay, anything you've heard of?
She's an expert.
She's an expert.
No?
No.
Thank you, doctor. So let me ask you some questions that are based on your expert opinion. How likely would you say that it was that a 13-year-old boy on November 19th of 2012 was killed by any animal up on Middle Mountain Road?
Same objection, Judge, as before. Goes to the ultimate issue for the jurors. I think she can speak to the general data, her research, behavior, but not the verdict form.
Well, she's not talking about the verdict form, but the witness can testify as the ultimate issue in controversy and the ultimate issue that the jury has to decide. Doesn't even have to be an expert; it can be anybody. So that's overruled. Go ahead.
Okay. So let me ask the question again. So how likely, in your expert opinion, knowing the animals, knowing the area, is it that a 13-year-old boy is killed on November 19th of 2012 by a bear up here? Let's start with the bear. How likely is that?
Up on Middle Mountain Road?
Yes.
Highly unlikely.
And how about?
Something I think that's worth pointing out too in terms of bears is this is the hunting season, like September through November is when bears are hunted. And being along a Forest Service road is a really dangerous place to be for a bear during the hunting season. So there's lots of published studies that show that bears avoid Forest Service roads during the hunting season. So yeah, but, I mean, that's an extra reason why I wouldn't expect bears to be hanging out during the hunting season on a Forest Service road.
So when you say highly unlikely, we're talking about even more unlikely than for over the course of 121 years because of some of those factors.
Yes.
How about the likelihood that any animal known to the Middle Mountain area killed a young boy on November 9th of 2012, a 13-year-old boy up in that mountain.
I think it's highly unlikely.
Even less likely for cougars or coyotes.
Asked and answered, Judge.
You can answer the question.
Even less likely by cougars and coyotes than black bears.
Yes, I mean, statistically, we'd say yes.
And I think we've discussed this thoroughly, but what's the chances that an animal would carry a young child, a 13-year-old child, from that residence up to that remain site one?
Highly unlikely.
That has been asked and answered.
I think it has been. Why don't you move on?
Thank you, Your Honor. Based on normal animal behavior in the area, we've talked about a few animals. How likely is it that any animal would carry a 13-year-old skull from remain site 2 to remain site 3?
Asked and answered.
It's okay, you can answer the question.
Unlikely.
And then let me ask you about one more sort of area of testimony. So you talked about the balance between nutrition and energy output, right? And we're talking about items that an animal might feed on, right? Like a carcass or even a bone, right? What about items that have no nutritional values? Let's take, for example, a cell phone. Is there any reason that an animal would pick up and move a cell phone a long distance?
No. I mean, again, coyotes, if anything, are canids, fox, I mean, they're more likely to pick up something in their mouth and carry it around for a distance. But yeah, I would not expect that, and certainly not a bear or cougar. No.
Okay. So randomly, a coyote might pick up something and run with it a little bit. How about something as large as a backpack with clothing in it? Is that the kind of thing that
I would not expect that.
of any animal?
No.
Okay. How about other inanimate items such as ball caps or wallets or things like that? Are those things an animal's going to have any interest in taking and moving with them?
Again, maybe a coyote or canid, but not the others.
Would you expect if animals were the only factor on a remain site there, that those types of items would be nearby where the body had been?
No.
Would you expect that?
I mean, if they're maybe on the body or something, but no. So, I mean, I would not expect.
Would you expect, let me ask I don't know if I asked the right question. Assuming that a body is placed at that location for whatever reason, and that body has items with it, like a backpack and a hat and a wallet and a cell phone, let's assume that for a minute. Would you expect any animal to have removed those types of items from that area, or would you expect those items to remain behind with the rest of the body?
I'd expect them to remain behind.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you, Doctor.
Mr. Bogan?
Yes, please. Afternoon, Doctor. I kind of want to move through a number of topics here, and the first one I want to visit generally is bear behavior, bear diet. You remember talking about that on direct testimony?
Yeah.
And if I get any scientific terms wrong or anything, but let everyone know that everyone will get a good laugh out of it. You discussed on direct testimony what bears eat depends on the time. It is one factor you can consider in trying to determine what bears eat is the time of year it is, correct?
Yeah, what's available at that time of year.
Right. And it sounds like what kind of food, what kind of resources are available to bears determines a lot of different things in bear behavior. Hibernation, what they eat, when they eat, conflicts, all that stuff. Safe to say?
Yes.
And depending on the time of year, bears will eat deer, elk, and vegetation, correct?
Correct. I mean, not all bears will eat, go after calves and fawns in the early summer, but that is part of the diet.
And they'll eat berries and acorns generally in the fall, correct?
Correct. That's ubiquitous for bears. Yeah.
And they supplement for their protein with insects, correct?
Yep, that's been, and diet studies have been done in Colorado. Yeah.
And one of the things you said was that bears are more likely to eat fawns and elk and deer, that sort of thing, in summer. What month did you say?
June, right when the calves and fawns are born.
Okay. And you also testified, and we'll get into this more in a minute, that you're aware of the fatal bear attack here in Durango, correct?
Correct.
And that was in April, right?
Correct.
And since we're on the topic, when we're talking about bear attacks on humans, those fall into two categories, correct?
Can you help me out a little bit?
Sure. When there's a human and bear conflict, that can be a defensive bear attack or a predatory bear attack, correct?
Correct.
And can you describe for the jury the difference between a defensive bear attack and a predatory bear attack?
I will. So bears can attack if they're defensive, is usually if they're protecting a food source, or if they have cubs. So that's when a bear would attack, if it has something like that, especially newborn cubs that we always hear about, right? Predatory is if the bear has decided that a person is food and it's going after someone as a food source. So those are generally the two kinds. My understanding is that the fatalities that have happened primarily are from predatory behavior.
Primarily from predatory behavior, where the bear identifies the person as food.
Correct.
And you know from being in the field that that's the kind of attack that happened in Durango in April, correct?
No, I was not I do not work for CPW anymore. I didn't have nothing to do with the attack in April.
And you haven't heard any information about that attack?
I just read it in the paper. Given, though, that there were remains found, that the bear had been feeding on the person, it appears that it was probably predatory.
Based on what it sounds like, based on what you've been heard, what you know about that attack, it sounds to you, as an expert,
That it was predatory based on what I read in the newspaper.
And that's a predatory attack of a bear attacking a bigger animal in April, right?
Correct.
And that falls outside of that range of months when you say that's typical of that kind of behavior, which is June, July, summer, correct?
Bear attacks are not typical, I would say. Bear attacks are incredibly rare, but most attacks have occurred in that, like, July, August, more of a peak summertime than on the early spring and the fall.
Right. And that coincides when bears are eating other larger animals, correct? Like fawns and
Some
stuff.
bears, not all bears will eat calves or fawns, but some will.
Some do, some, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what's available to them, in their home range, what's there.
Now, another thing that bears will eat is anthropogenic food, correct?
Correct.
And describe for us all what anthropogenic food is.
Just means human food. Trash, bird seed, pet food.
And you've studied bear interactions and bear eating anthropogenic human food quite a bit, correct?
Correct.
And that was one of the things that was part of your study here in Durango and southwestern Colorado as well, right?
Right.
Another dietary behavior of bears is they will scavenge animals that have already been killed or dead, correct?
Correct.
And as you testified on direct, whether it's an animal that a bear killed or an animal that a bear scavenged, they may drag that carcass, correct?
Correct.
To a place where they feel safe, correct?
Correct.
And according to your expertise, your study, that can be typically 100 yards up to 300 yards, or maybe you said meters.
Yeah, within a few hundred yards. Most commonly within 100 yards. It will depend on the habitat, really, how open or not the habitat is. You know, if they're already in a closed, dense place, you don't need to move it anywhere. You know, an animal's good to go. Can you not hear me very well? Is that what that means? Yeah. Yeah, so it just depends on you know, the area.
It depends on how that particular bear defines safe place to eat.
Yeah, but most bears define it pretty similarly.
Right.
Define it pretty similarly.
And have you seen kill sites where animals have been killed and then scavenged by animals before? And I'm not just talking bears.
Yes.
And what kind of animals have you seen scavenge, or what kind of animals have you seen scavenge animal kill sites?
All kinds of things. I mean, anything that's left out. So scavengers, yeah, I've seen bobcats, foxes, lots of ravens, magpies, so a suite of skunks, all kinds of critters, really.
Magpies, skunks, bobcats, vultures, coyotes, bears, cougars, they all scavenge, correct?
Correct.
And mountain lions as well, as you testified, they'll drag their prey or whatever they're scavenging as well, correct?
They will. Cougars don't like to scavenge. Cougars like to kill their own food for the most part. They will scavenge sometimes, but generally cougars are a species that's, you know, known to not really like to scavenge.
They don't like to scavenge, but you know from your expertise it's a behavior they will.
They will do.
Okay. And whether it's something the cougar has killed or scavenged, they'll drag those materials as well, correct?
Yeah, certainly what they've killed. Yeah.
And they'll drag that longer distances than bears, based upon your experience, your expertise, your review of the literature.
Yes.
And by the same token, and we've talked about this a little bit, coyotes, notorious scavengers, correct?
Yeah.
And meaning they'll feed on animals that are already dead, and they'll even carry these materials away from the original kill site or scavenging site as well, right?
Right.
And as you testified on direct, coyotes are better known for carrying parts of carcasses away than cougars and bears, right?
I mean, I'd say a bone, not parts of carcasses,
Okay.
but like a bone.
Right.
Something they fit in their mouth, right?
Thanks for. Coyotes are better known, based upon your expertise, your review of the literature, your observations in the field, of carrying bones further distances than bears and cougars, correct?
Correct.
Now, you testified on direct about one of your published papers, and that was Human Development and Climate Effect Hibernation in Large Carnivore with Implications for Human Carnivore Conflicts, correct?
Correct.
And I want to talk about that study, because it sounded like on your direct testimony that study informed you with a lot of information about bears and bear behavior and human-bear interactions in this part of the state. Is that
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
And what you did in that particular study is you located the dens of bears, correct?
Correct.
Adult female bears, correct?
Correct.
Adult female bears within 10 kilometers of Durango, correct?
No. We captured bears mostly within 10 kilometers of Durango, but the bears move. I mean, the bear that we caught, for example, or the bear I discussed in Brycedo, for example, that food failure year, we caught her down on Florida Road, but she just had come because she was hungry that year, and then she spent most of the time up by Brycedo. So, yeah, wherever the bears went, we went.
Oh.
So it's a much bigger area.
Yeah, so there's a much bigger area, but you focused your collaring activities within 10 clicks of Durango.
Our trapping activities, yeah.
Do the trapping within 10 kilometers of Durango, and the bear is going to go where bear is going to go, right?
Correct.
And it sounds like you were able to track at least one adult female bear to the Middle Mountain area, correct?
We had one collared female bear that consistently used Runlet Peak to hibernate on. We had about a half a dozen bears that used the Vicedo area at some point.
And again, when you say we have half a dozen bears, those numbers are confined to adult female bears, right?
Correct.
No male bears in the study.
Correct.
And this was a study of hibernation, not a study of kill sites or bear diet, correct?
This one paper was focused on hibernation. Correct.
And I want to talk about hibernation for a minute or two because you talked about it on direct. It sounds like you've given some general ideas or general numbers of when hibernation begins and when a hibernation generally ends for black bears in this part of the state, safe to say?
Correct.
And I want to ask you and talk to you about factors that can move that start date for particular bears, okay?
Okay.
And safe to say, the start date for hibernation is most dependent upon the characteristics of that individual bear, correct?
Correct.
And that start date for hibernation is most dependent on not just the characteristics of that individual bear, but the environment that bear is in and what's going on there as well, correct?
We found that the factors that were biggest contributors were first bear's age and reproductive success. Then they went to more the environmental factors in terms of natural food availability.
And some factors that can push back the start of hibernation date includes warm weather, correct?
Correct.
And another factor that can push back the start date of hibernation is an individual bear's access to anthropogenic foods, correct?
Correct. It was a weaker influence than natural foods, but yes.
Right. And this feeds into a bigger concept you were talking to the jury about earlier, that that start of hibernation is going to depend on availability of food, right? Amongst other factors.
Yes.
And that's going to include natural food and food that bears can find in and around houses and neighborhoods and subdivisions, correct?
Correct.
And in trash, right?
Yep.
And where trash can be found.
Yeah, it comes down to a bear needs a lot of food, so yeah.
A bear needs a lot of food, so they're kind of always in the market.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be a pretty abundant supply of human foods for bear, so it, yeah.
Now, as you testified on direct, there's good natural food years and there's bad natural food years, right?
Correct.
And you've described what can contribute to a bad natural food year, and we don't need to revisit that. But you know from your studies, from your expertise, and from the study you did here in southwestern Colorado, if it's a bad natural food year, bears will be drawn to anthropogenic food sources, correct?
Correct.
Meaning if they can't find food occurring naturally, growing on bushes and berries and walking down the road or whatever, then bears are going to be drawn to areas where there's human food, right?
Correct.
Bad food year, bears start going towards anthropogenic food, neighborhoods, cities, dumpsters, houses, trailer parks, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
And in fact, you even gave anecdotal testimony about a bear that came all the way from the top of the little plot
You
up.
know, you've said this 4 times. Okay? 4 times is enough.
I was going to build on.
Now, you know you're going on a specific instance, but it's all, you're saying the same thing over and over, Mr. Bogan.
Your findings that bears will select for human development in poor natural food years, that was replicated, and you found that again in another paper you published, correct? Shifting Perception.
Yeah, we've published it in several papers.
Now, I want to talk generally about bear population numbers in this part of the state. You can't speak to how many bears are in the Durango area, correct? You can't say this is how many bears are habitating there, correct?
We published a paper in 2018 that estimated bear abundance across kind of the greater Durango area in 2011 through 2014.
Well, I stand corrected. What does that number look like?
2011 and 2012, it was, I hate giving numbers off the top of my head. I think 2011 is around 175-ish bears. 2012, this is adult females, we estimate the adult female population size. It was about 200 in 2012, then we had that food failure and it dropped down to like 86 bears. So the adult female population size, we estimated, declined by 60% during that natural food failure.
And again, those findings are confined to adult female bears, correct?
Correct. Not just adults. We used a non-invasive genetic sampling technique where we were using DNA for that. And so it excluded cubs because cubs were too little to get caught on our barbed wire snares that we put out. But it would have included females, yearlings, and anything older than a yearling female. But
not adult male bears.
Correct.
So you can't opine as to what those numbers were in these years.
No, I mean adults. We know male population is less than the female population because they're harvested more heavily.
But you can't tell this jury how many male bears you think were living in this area.
No.
In those years.
No.
And I've been referring to Durango. That would go for Vallecito as well, correct?
The area that we estimated abundance, I don't think it did include Vallecito. Close, but I don't think it did. The study area is published, though, that the area, the specific area that those numbers refer to, that's all published and freely available online.
Now, going back to the paper that you spoke about, that I'm just going to call Human Development, again, that was a study on hibernation, correct?
Yeah. Can I clarify one point real quick? That just, because the area, this kind of area, how many bears over what area, that part really matters. So that was over like a 220 square mile area around Durango. So numbers are hard, numbers are hard because it's all relative to a certain area. So that's why I just want to clarify the area.
Right, and that's why you included in that paper a map of the study area, correct?
Right. But I just also want to give folks a sense. It's 576 square kilometers, or about 220 square miles.
Permission to approach with what's been previously marked as defendant's 1904.
Yes.
And Doctor, do you know what defense 1904 is?
Yeah, these were dens that we.
Oh, wait. Sorry. I don't mean to be rude. We got rules about what people can talk about when they get handed a piece of paper. And so I'm going to ask you to stick with me on these yes or no questions. Do you know what that exhibit is?
Yes.
Is it a map that you produced as part of your study, as part of your paper, Human Development?
Yes.
And does that exhibit accurately portray the map that you produced as part of your study?
I think so, yes.
Would looking at the page of your study help clarify if that's an accurate representation?
Sure.
Permission to approach.
Yes.
Yes.
So going back to defendant's exhibit, 1902, is that an accurate reproduction of the map you produced as part of your study of adult female black bears?
Yes.
Move to admit, Judge.
Well, but it's a map of what?
What is it a map of?
It's a map of dens that we investigated around Durango for the study, but I don't know if it includes every single den. Or I think, yeah, I need to double check that on the scale, because I think there were, and in the title of the figure that it's showing dens around Durango, but I don't think it's all inclusive.
All inclusive study area?
All inclusive of every den that was included in the study.
Okay.
I think it's,
But all inclusive of what's in the map?
yeah,
All right. Any objection?
I need to double check that.
If the witness is comfortable with it being accurate, I have no objection.
Okay, I'll admit it.
And Judge, I don't have digital, but I do have a poster board of this exhibit I'd ask to publish.
Yeah, you may.
And
You can walk
Hold it.
around. Yes.
I brought an easel, but didn't like that. Can you explain to the jury what this map portrays based upon your research of adult female black bears in this area? Kind of walk us through what this shows, what the red dots are, what we're looking for.
Yeah, we put this figure in there just to get us, just to in our paper, we put a figure in there to get a better sense of, for folks to see how we've gone to dens with different elevations in different areas around Durango. So this is, yeah, it's a general area map with den locations marked on it.
You can say the red dots on the map are den locations, correct?
Correct.
Which are accurate as the papers published, but don't represent even all the dens of adult female bears.
That's the part that I want to double check, because I think that there's ones, yeah, upside zone, and I think we might have zoomed in a bit for people to better see the elevation gradient.
So there's even more dens in this area than the map.
Potentially, that's what I'd want to double check. Yeah.
So which is the exhibit?
The-
That one? Is that the, I just want to make sure we have
I would have to admit the poster board, so
it. Can you, it's not marked, is it?
it is on that.
Is it? Okay, great. Hold on. Well, I'm not sure. I think it's just the poster board, correct? Is the only 1904?
Please.
Okay.
Now, one of the purposes of your hibernation study was to kind of produce those numbers of a mean date, average date, and what kind of got reluctantly referred to as outliers for start dates of hibernation, correct?
That wasn't the motivating factor of the study, but it was something that we reported in
Right.
the study.
And when you started your analysis of the start date of hibernation for these sorts of bears, you defined the start of hibernation as the first day between September 1st and December 30th, correct?
That they met a certain criteria. We used an accelerometer that was on the collar that was tracking bear activity. So between those dates, September 1st and the end of December, we looked within that window as to where their activity dropped below a certain threshold that we called hibernation. That was based on data on bears, captive bears that had worn those collars, so we knew what hibernation looked like.
Right. And part of your analysis was defining hibernation as the first day between September 1st and December 30th, right?
That bears stopped moving, yes.
Now, one of the things you testified on direct is it based upon your expertise with vertebrates? You've seen coyotes actually carry off inanimate objects, right?
Yeah, that's also something coyotes are known to do. Canids are known to do.
Coyotes is a specific kind of canid, right?
Yeah.
And when you say canids, you're referring to coyotes, foxes,
yeah.
And we won't say the W word because wolves ain't in play here, correct?
Correct.
And you've actually observed coyotes running off with some of your radio collars, right?
Yeah, I've had to go fetch them, yes.
And I think you testified they took off with them for hundreds of yards or several hundred yards. How far was it?
I didn't have any more than a few hundred yards.
Now, I'd ask the people to publish 224 as they did during their direct examination. I think that's the topographical map. Thank you. And you've studied vertebrates, coyotes, mountain lions, cougars, bears, canids, just about all the vertebrates that live and populate in this part of the world, as portrayed on People's 224, right?
Not all of them.
That's probably a bridge too far.
And in this area, bears. I mean, this is what I studied here in this area were the bears.
But today you've given testimony about bears, coyotes, and cougars, right?
Right.
Permission to move to the screen?
Yes.
Thank you. And you've talked about how you yourself have done research up and around Middle Mountain. I think you said about 8 times or so, correct?
Correct.
And I think you were pretty emphatic in how you said, when you go up here to do research, you're going to drive as far as you want.
Yeah, mostly I was on a snowmobile. Most of our trips were in the winter.
And that's because you prefer, for research and other reasons, to not have to hike all of this terrain, correct?
Absolutely.
And that's because, as you've described it, it's steep in areas, heavily wooded, fallen wood, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But having studied, as you testified, the animals that live in this area, you wouldn't tell this jury that coyote couldn't navigate these fallen trees and forests and topography, correct?
Correct.
And you wouldn't tell this jury that neither a mountain lion cougar would be unable to walk through this area from Runlet Park to any of this area on the map.
Correct.
And you wouldn't tell this jury that it would be impossible for a bear to navigate this terrain.
Correct.
Because that's what these animals do. It's their job to navigate this terrain.
Read it out loud, please.
Sorry, yes, I agree.
Nothing further for this witness.
Okay, redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let me start where counsel left off. I think we'd all agree, right? It's not impossible that an animal this size could, for example, carry a skull 1.5 miles in the woods, right?
Not impossible.
But is that normal animal behavior?
No, not especially for a bear cougar.
Okay. And in terms of impossible, we'd all have to agree, too, it's not impossible that a bear could kill a 13-year-old child on Middle Mountain Road, right?
No.
I think this is scope. I never addressed any of these specific hypotheticals. I asked if she would tell the folks in the jury whether or not animals could walk through that part of the map.
I think it's fair redirect based upon the totality of your cross. Go ahead.
A lot of things are possible. We'd have to even acknowledge that it's possible that a person could be killed on Middle Mountain Road by a bear November 19th of 2012.
Correct.
But highly unlikely.
Correct.
Leading.
Try not to lead anymore, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, Your Honor. So there are probably a lot of wildlife experts out there, I would imagine, and you probably know a lot of them, right?
Quite a few.
Okay. But are your opinions here based on general knowledge of wildlife, or do you also have a firsthand knowledge and data from this area on this year to share with this jury?
Scope.
I think you've already established that anyway. That's more argumentative, Mr. Johnson. Ask a different question, please.
Okay, I will, Your Honor. I think we've already covered what the hibernation data is in terms of the mean and the outlier, but you were asked then specifically about male bears. You remember that line of questioning?
Yeah.
And you had previously testified that you had collars on both female pregnant bears and female non-pregnant bears. You remember that?
Yes.
Do you feel confident from the literature that you've reviewed that this is representative also of male bears when you talk to this jury about hibernation patterns?
Yes. The range should be representative of all bears, males and females, given that we had a lot of non-pregnant females collared.
In particular, that would include the date that male bears will go down to hibernate on the year of 2012.
Yes, that's what we'd expect based on the literature.
And your study was designed to gather data for that very purpose? For bears in general in their hibernation times, that was data that you were collecting?
Yeah.
Okay. So can we apply those October 10th mean date and the edge of the range at November 13th to male bears too?
I would think so, yes.
And then when we're talking about fatalities in the whole United States, have any of those other fatalities ever been in La Plata County besides the one in 2021?
No.
Is that a male or a female bear that killed that person?
Female.
Thank you. I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Anything from the jury? No? This witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
By all means.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. You're free to go. And I'm guessing you don't have a 5-minute witness?
No 5-minute witness, Your Honor.
We can only hope. Ladies and gentlemen, again, my admonitions, don't discuss this case amongst yourselves or anybody else. Don't initiate, post, or respond to anything on social media. Keep an open mind throughout the trial. Reach a decision only during your final deliberations. Don't let anybody else talk to you about the case. Report it to me if they continue to do so after you ask them not to. Don't gather any information on your own. Don't do any outside reading. Don't visit any places. Don't read about this case in the newspaper or listen to it if it's on the radio, television, internet, social media, or any other source. And remember, you have to learn about the case based upon what you find out in the courtroom. With that, we'll just keep on the same schedule. Start up as close after 8 as we can, and have a good evening. Everybody rise to the jury. And please make sure the prosecution has provided those, I think it's 2 diagrams about the sites for the body covered. Okay, being given to you right now. If we have any problems with what's there, we can talk about it first thing in the morning. With that, we'll be in recess. Let's do something else.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, John. You bet.
But I don't have the secure area where I can keep my phone, so I don't know what the list is. Judge, I gotta drive home.